From Photoshop to Premiere Pro and the simplest of them all, a humble PDF file. Now, I'm pretty sure anyone watching this video has used an Adobe software one way or another in their life. Now, just last week, they announced the acquisition of Figma, a collaborative design software, for an eye-watering 20 billion in a half-share, half-cash deal. Now, in this video, we're going to examine what the hype is all about and whether it is actually a smart acquisition for Adobe or a dilutive one. Stay till the end of the video to hear my thoughts and opinions. As a disclaimer, whatever I say in this video should not constitute a buy or sell advice, as I'm not licensed to do so. It's purely for educational purposes only and sharing of my opinion. And last but not least, I also do own Adobe shares at the point of this recording. So first off, what does Adobe do? They are actually a design software builder. If you ask any video editor worth their chops, they will definitely tell you they know Adobe Premiere Pro. If you ask any graphic designer, they definitely know either Illustrator or Photoshop, and it becomes the world standard in terms of design. Now, they do have simpler software like Adobe Acrobat, which helps people standardize printing, the dimensions of any document that you print anywhere around the world. It has been a big help for me when I was doing my master's degree and when I was doing my degree. And when you have to prepare documents, huge documents that you want to ensure that the alignment, the sizes of it are standardized in any form, whenever you send them over, Adobe Acrobat is the way to go. So what other softwares do they have? They do have other cloud collaboration software in terms of design, and they're fighting against people like Canva, you know, the Australian startup that is today a multi unicorn. And yeah, I think in terms of the design community, they are way up there because of their ubiquitous nature of their software. What about Figma? Now, this software was started in 2010 by a 20-year-old, and I'm going to describe that a little bit more later. But it was the pioneer in how design tools were built for the web. Now, most design tools like Adobe were not built for the web. It was built for an offline version where people will actually share files and different versions of it. And Figma was one of the first, their mission was really to help teams collaborate visually, and one of the first software companies to allow building softwares designed for the cloud from the ground up. And design was their niche rather than office productivity, like where Microsoft Office or even the Google Enterprise Suite are, but theirs are really for design. They have two killer apps or killer products. One is Figma itself. It's an all-in-one product design platform. Now, if you look at the board, like a Kanban board, it really looks like a Trello, which I'll describe the familiarities or the similarities later. And the other one is a Figma Jam, which is their online whiteboard for teams. Very similar to Google Jamboard, actually. Now, why is Figma important or a revolution in the software design space? Now, if you look back I would say 10 years ago, a lot of softwares have not been designed actually with collaborative environment in mind. Most of it are offline versions. Now, think about the days when you had to work on, let's say, a PowerPoint presentation, and you need to collaborate with 3 of your colleagues. For the second colleague to be able to input his design, he would probably have to wait for the first colleague to finish, email off that copy or that version via email to the second colleague before he or she can start working on it. And the third person, the third collaborator, would only be able to start his work after the second person has finished it. And by then, a lot of the revision controls, what the first collaborator did, the second collaborator did, and the third collaborator did, there was no tracking system. Probably you have to manually rename the file collaborator 1, collaborator 2 to be able to know the revision of it. And if your filing system was not very structured or systemized, that's where you don't even know what revision of the software you're working on, right? So there comes a very big problem, especially when softwares have not been designed from the ground up to be cloud native or cloud first. And therefore, Figma saw this very big problem in 2010. And with the cloud taking on stream, that's where they hatched this idea of design collaboration on the cloud. So look at Figma like your design operating system. Now, why do I say that? If you think of Microsoft Windows, it is a standalone version for that particular PC, but Figma resides purely on the cloud. It's actually a operating system that is designed with cloud native, so you can run it off a browser, and the power of it is that you don't actually need to even embed it onto your local or offline operating system. So it resides purely on the cloud. Now, for those engineers out there or people who run project management, I'm pretty sure you're very familiar with this software called Microsoft Projects. So in Microsoft Projects, you see schedules, you have your planner looked at it, you have your engineers looked at it, and you plan out the whole project, and you probably attach files into Microsoft Project. But even then, it was not designed as a cloud native software. So couple that with another component, which is the guys like Trello, the guys like Asana, and the guys like ClickUp. I know some of you may not be familiar with these softwares, but these are workflow team collaboration softwares that allow you to work and collaborate in real time, cloud natively. And what Figma is trying to do is to embed all these functionalities of project management, of design, of workflow management, all into one software. That's why it is deemed something like a operating system for design, and this is a pioneering space, because I think one of the earlier pioneers as well is also Canva. Canva, their mission is to actually simplify design for newcomers, those that are not professionals, single business owners. And where Figma actually excels is that they combine the functionality of workflow as well, team workflow and team task assignment. And that's where Figma is seen as somewhat of stepping somewhat into Adobe space, because they they actually pretty powerful in terms of design. It may not have the full functionalities of Adobe Illustrator or Adobe Photoshop, but where their power really is the collaborative work environment, and that's where Adobe saw the value in them. So a little bit about Figma's history. It was started in 2012 by this guy called Dylan Field. And at that point of time, between April 2020 and May 2021, which is pretty recent, the valuation increased from 2 billion to 10 billion, and they roughly had about 4 million users. Big tech companies were using them: Dropbox, Rakuten, Slack, Twitter, even Volvo. Can you imagine? Such a renowned car company using Figma as their collaborative design software environment. So where is Figma right now? They have about 850 employees, total addressable market of roughly 16.5 billion by 2025, just for the design, whiteboarding, and collaboration addressable market. They are confident of adding roughly 200 million of annual recurring revenue in 2022, and then it's going to surpass 400 million exiting fiscal year of 2022. They also have this thing called best in class net dollar retention, which is greater than 150%. Now, don't worry if you don't understand this term. I'm going to explain it shortly. And very efficient business model, gross margins of more than 90%. Can you imagine, how many businesses in the world have gross margins of more than 90%? And they are currently positive operating cash flow. So most businesses in the startup regime, even our Grab, they don't even have positive operating cash flow. For Malaysians, this is a national icon, and yet they struggle to make positive operating cash flows, where Figma is like well above in positive operating cash flow territory. So what does net dollar retention actually mean? It is a percentage of revenue from the current customers of last year, and adding on the upgrades, the downgrades, and the churn. Now, in very simple English is this: let's just say last year you had 100 customers, and you added 50 customers this year, but you lost 80 customers. Your net dollar retention would be 80%, right? But if you had 100 customers last year, you added 50 customers this year, and you did not have anyone dropped off or anyone canceling the subscription, your net dollar retention would be 150. On the table on the left, you would see that these are average benchmarks of most SaaS companies. S1 just means their prospectus year, their filing. And on average, the median net dollar retention for most of these SaaS companies are 104%. Figma, on the other hand, had a net dollar retention of 150%, which is really best in class. So that's something that probably Adobe actually picked up, realized the growth that they were going to, and that's why they are probably one of the reasons why they acquired Figma at this eye-watering prices. I'll share more reasonings after this. So can Adobe's finances actually stomach this acquisition? Remember, half cash, half shares of 20 billion. So as of financial year end 2021, Adobe had roughly 5.79, right, 5.8 billion cash and cash equivalent, and the operating cash flow for a year was roughly 7.2 billion. Okay, so those were the financial positions that Adobe had going into this acquisition. So they definitely need to at least finance half of their cash needed to actually purchase Figma, because they only have about 5.8 billion, sorry, in cash and cash equivalent. And the operating cash flow, if they were to spend their entire operating cash flow to pay off this acquisition, I think they would pay it off in probably about 2 years, roughly, with seven very strong, very healthy, positive operating cash flow actually. So on a safer side, I also examined whether Adobe had existing debts, and they did. As of 2020, they had 3.14 billion, which they paid off within the same year, 3.15 billion. So right now, there's no big debt on their balance sheet. They're paying financing interest costs of roughly about 100 million a year, which is very, very small comparatively to their cash flow. But this acquisition will really put a strain on their balance sheet, and that's why their share price has been hammered nicely. A lot of analysts think that this is actually a very dilutive acquisition for Adobe, and I think otherwise, because of the vision of where Figma can actually play a role in expanding Adobe's market reach to the collaborative working environment total addressable market. So if we were to go back in time and examine a similar situation 8 years ago, which is considered dinosaur years in the tech industry, there was another eye-watering acquisition, which was Facebook's acquisition of the messaging services platform called WhatsApp. And they bought WhatsApp for 19 billion when they only had about 400 million users, and they believed that WhatsApp was on the path to achieving or connecting 1 billion users. Now you fast forward that to that till today in 2022, WhatsApp currently has 2 billion monthly active users. So was it a smart acquisition in hindsight? Yeah, it does seem to be, even though WhatsApp has not, in Mark Zuckerberg's own words, really been squeezed in terms of monetization yet. But I'm drawing this parallel to show you that what Adobe is trying to do when they buy Figma, because they know that even though Figma only has a 16.5 billion total addressable market today, but that's purely on a pure cloud-based, design-only, design community kind of total addressable market. But with Adobe going to inject a lot of their design software features into Figma, I don't know whether they'll be good or bad, whether it's going to turn Figma worse than where it is today. That's something of a question of execution. But if they do turn it to be successful, I'm pretty sure Adobe saw a larger addressable market than the 16.5 billion that Figma predicted they have today, because there's a lot of overlap. So your design is only 16.5 billion TAM, but you've not combined the collaboration work software, the address or the area where guys like Trello play, the guys like the ERP, enterprise resource planning players, software players play. So they may see a very accretive kind of synergy when they actually buy over Figma with that workflow in place. So my concluding thoughts are this: collaborative tools and cloud native software are going to hold an even more important position in the software design space. The other good thing about this acquisition is Adobe and Figma clearly stating that they will maintain their independence. Therefore, I think that would highly reduce a clash of cultural or roadmap software rollouts that these two companies are going to go forward with. Thirdly, I think Adobe will likely wind down Adobe XD because it's a very similar or even competing product with Figma, and that would actually reduce the need of overlapping resources for these two softwares. And last but not least, Canva, in my prediction, and I may be wrong or may be right, will likely be the next acquisition target, considering that they are very much in the design collaborative space, but even though they target more retail clients or retail designers, but you never know. So those are my thoughts. I hope what I've shared with you today has brought value watching this video. If you do find value in what I do, please consider giving me a subscription, give me a like, hit that notification bell so that when new content or new companies that I cover is out, you guys will be the first to be notified. I'll see you guys in the next video. Ciao.